What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Boogie2988 coming at your live again through the power of the internet. And today I thought it would be a lot of fun to do a video game console tier list. This is every video game console I have ever owned and how I feel they rank based on the graphics, the game quality, the access to the games and the games that are on that platform, and just overall my experience with those gaming consoles. A little bit of personal history here for you as well, so you can find out the game consoles I owned and the ones I didn't. Okay, starting off with the Atari 2600, the very first gaming console I ever owned, and it is arguably the very first gaming console anyone could have ever owned because it's the very first gaming console. So for that reason, don't you put that in the S tier? Like it invented video game consoles. However, what was the pixel output on this? Like 14 by 12? The games looked like garbage. Most of the games were not particularly fun. Sure, you had like a bad version of Pac-Man, a bad version of Asteroids, but you had some real games too, like Pitfall. Pitfall looks pretty good. Let's be honest, Pitfall looks pretty good still today, kind of. I don't know. I think you put it in the bottom tier. Because that is the very baseline of what a gaming console was supposed to be. It was a piece of electronics that you could stick a cartridge in and play something that kind of resembled a video game. Wasn't that bad for the year I got it, like 1979 though. I mean, it was pretty decent then. Next gaming console I owned was the Nintendo Entertainment System. Begged for this when it first came out. Didn't get it when it first came out. I think it came out when like October 1985. That seems right. I got it for my birthday a year later, so I was effectively 12 years old when I got my Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was life-altering. This system is still good to this day. I mean, there are games that you can play on the system today. Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3, still incredible games. The original Final Fantasy, the original Dragon Warrior, okay, maybe not the original Dragon Warrior, but there are games on this system that you can still play to this day. Does that make it A tier? No, I'm telling you, it's S tier, and I'll tell you why it's S tier. Not only is it one of the best gaming consoles I ever owned, not did they have just a huge library, but it saved the gaming community from the great video game crash that Atari caused. That alone, as much as I would love to put like Atari up here in the S tier, because obviously it's incredible, it was the first gaming console with bad games, this had good games, and it saved us. There wouldn't be video games, I think, without the Nintendo Entertainment System. Easily S tier. All right, here's the moment where I upset Sega fans. When it comes to the Sega Master System or the Sega Genesis, never owned them. Borrowed my friends occasionally, traded out for it, played their games over at their houses, rented the Sega Master System, rented the Genesis. I've never owned one to this day. So I'm not going to put it on the list. If I was going to put the Master System on the list, I would probably put it up there in the B category. And the Genesis, I would definitely probably put up in the A category. Had some great games on it. I grew up poor. We were not a multi-console house. The fact that I had a Nintendo Entertainment System or Atari 2600, very lucky. So sorry, Sega fans. Next up is the Super Nintendo, and I think I'm going to upset Nintendo fans here. But keep in mind, this is my subjective tier list. The roles these gaming consoles played in my lifetime. Okay. Your list will probably be different, but this is for me. And the Super Nintendo, I did not get access to it when it first came out. I think it came out like my junior or senior year of high school. We were having money issues. I got to rent one a couple of times, and I loved it. I didn't get one until I traded for one in college, though. And I had very limited access to the games. And the library seems really small to me compared to the NES because of that reason. Though I've gone back and played most of the classics on the Super Nintendo, I would put it up here with the NES. I really would, but it did not play that pivotal role in my life. I did not get to play all of the games that I wanted to play on it, and the games that I got to play on it were not as important to me as the ones on the NES. It's going in the A tier. I feel like a lot of people would put it in the S tier, and that's okay if you do. But for me, it was not as pivotal as the NES. Next up, that classic gray brick, the Game Boy, and I owned one. It was a battery hog. The games were expensive, and they were very simple for what they've done. I've gone back and played a lot of Game Boy games on emulators, and I eventually got a Super Game Boy for my Super NES and got to play some of the games that way. As pivotal as this was, as much as it was the first handheld gaming system that wasn't made by like Tiger, Yeah, it's kind of the baseline. It's kind of what a handheld system should have been. I don't know. I think I put it down there with the Atari 2600. It was the very baseline of what a handheld system should be. I know a lot of people have fond memories of it. I have fond memories of it, but let's be honest, it's kind of crap tier. It's even at the time with no backlighting and the horrible screen and the horrible battery life, even then it was just the bare minimum. I was fortunate enough to own a Nintendo 64. And this is a great system. It was exactly what I wanted the system to be. I got it for the very first 3D Mario game that I ever played, and it was absolutely incredible. As for the rest of the game library, though, it seemed to be lacking for me. You had, a handful of RPGs, you had a handful of games. I remember playing Bomberman on the system very fondly, but yeah, for the most part, I bet a lot of you guys had more access to these games. I haven't even gone back to play these games emulated. I really haven't. I don't know. The Nintendo 64, barely a blip on my radar. I guess it was just the wrong age demographic, and I think I was going through a lot in my personal life at the time, so it was okay. It was okay. Next up is Game Boy Color, and yeah, never owned it. I enjoyed the Game Boy so little. I just never invested in a Game Boy Color. Skipped that generation. It did have a handful of exclusives, though, that I've never played to this day. The GameCube was definitely an underrated system. I owned one. I absolutely loved it. I actually won it in a contest on the internet. That's why I was able to have access to it. And I loved it. I played a lot of games on it. Ooh, there are some good games on the GameCube. I have very fond memories of the GameCube, though it was an unpopular system, one of the most unpopular systems for Nintendo. So I feel like I'm going to put it up there with the N64. The game library was small. The games were not their absolute best. There were some great games on that system, though. Was it Super Mario Sunshine on the GameCube? Oh, nope, final answer. Final answer. Next up is the PlayStation. And I actually discovered that Final Fantasy VII was a thing. I went into a EB Games at the mall and asked for a copy of Final Fantasy VII and whatever system I needed to play that on. The system I got was obviously the PlayStation, and as much as I did dabble with the PlayStation, pretty much it was a Final Fantasy VII machine for me. I beat all the weapons, I dug through that game, I did everything there was to do in that game. Still had a very solid library. It still had a lot of fun games, which I would rent a game all the time whenever I had free time. I owned like 5 games for the PlayStation. But I'm really glad I owned it. It was a good system. I have very fond memories, especially of Final Fantasy VII. So easily it's better. Yep. It goes into the A tier. I mean, I think a lot of people would put it in the S tier, and I get that. I understand that. That's just not where it is for me. I hope you understand. I'm beginning to believe I'm the reason that Sega failed, though, because Sega Dreamcast, never owned it. Sega Saturn, never owned it. I basically have never owned any Sega systems. Someone gave me a Dreamcast a few years back, and I've dabbled with it a little bit, but honestly, yeah, Sega, I'm the reason you failed as a company. Also, those terrible Sonic games. For some reason, this system... There's no 3DS on this tier list, or TurboGrafx 16. There's some gaming consoles missing off this tier list. I did not make this tier list. I'm going to let this be the stand-in for the 3DS, which I'm just going to be honest with you. I adore my 3DS. Horrible rocky start. I didn't buy one of the first year. Very few people did. But ultimately, it became one of the best handhelds of all time. Of all time. Does that put it in the S tier? I really think it does. The 3D gimmick I just barely ever used. I think hardly anybody else used it, but it did everything you wanted it to do. It was a incredible system. So pretend that is a Nintendo 3DS. That is S tier for me. So good. Going back to Sony for a second, let's talk PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2, arguably the best PlayStation that I have ever owned. probably my favorite PlayStation that I've ever owned. The game library here was absolutely ludicrous. And do you guys remember the iToy? I bought the iToy to get like a form of exercise because I was always interested in using my body as a controller because I'm into gimmicks. I used that iToy to be my very first camera for YouTube. True story. PlayStation 2, though. I mean, what is there? People built it into their cars. The people built portable PlayStation 2s. PlayStation 2, one of the best consoles of any generation ever. Absolutely incredible. But now, picking on Microsoft a little bit, I think we can easily put the original Xbox in D tier if we wanted to. Because it was just a Halo machine. All we ever did on it was play Halo and Halo 2. That's the only thing I ever did with an Xbox. Except later you turn it into an emulator. But I think because Halo and Halo 2 were so important, you could easily put this on the C tier. I really think you could put it on the C tier, but I'm not. It was an exciting gaming console. I'm glad that it existed. I'm glad that PlayStation and Nintendo had the competition, but it's the bare minimum. Like, that's the bare minimum of what Microsoft should be doing. That's a bare minimum of what a gaming console made by Microsoft should have been. Going back to handhelds for a second, we've got the PSP, and nope, never owned it. I did, however, own a Vita. And the Vita was absolutely amazing. And the games that were on it were absolutely amazing. All 6 of them that were not indie games. Though the problem is the Vita continues to be absolutely abandoned pretty much right out of the gate by PlayStation. It's so frustrating. I know the 3DS absolutely stomped it, but it was such a good system. You can easily put it on D tier, but because I liked the games that were on it so much, and because I used it to lay in bed and play my PlayStation 4, I'm going to put the Vita in C tier. I mean, it was slightly above the minimum, but barely that because PlayStation just gave up on it the second it was out the door. And I don't understand why they had to put proprietary memory in it. Those memory cards were like $1 million. Why? Why, Sony? Why? Then we've got the Xbox 360, which I owned an arcade at first. And I spent a reasonable amount of time playing with my Xbox 360, but my gamer score back in the day was so low because I mostly played games offline. I mostly borrowed friends' games. I played at my friends' houses. But, I mean, you cannot argue with the fact that it is an incredible gaming console. I think most people would put it on S tier. And I think that's fair because of what it meant to the industry and what it did for the industry and how it changed the industry. I'm not going to put it there because in my personal story, it was not that defining. I think it's easily an A tier for me. Though I'm really tempted to just say, since it brought Microsoft really into the fray and really changed the entire gaming world, you could easily put that on the S tier. I think, my personal list, it stays on A. It probably should be an S, though. Speaking of abandoned systems, can we talk about the Wii U for a second? Great game library. Great system. Stupidly gimmicky, though. Absolutely hated that second screen. No purpose for it whatsoever. Yeah, that's going into the B list. I played almost every Wii U game that got published on disc. I own almost a complete category of every first-party game on the Wii U. And it's just not that great of a system. It's really not. I fought hard for that system when it came out, too. Nobody was buying it, though. Now, how did I forget the Wii? This is the best-selling gaming console of all time. It deserves to be in S tier, right? Right? Except, let's be honest, how many people just bought it to bowl? Most people, your grandparents, your parents bought it just to bowl. The bulk library on the Wii is just abysmal. There's so many horrible games on that system. They're not even worth porting over. Now, the first-party games are incredible. Galaxy 2, Twilight Princess. Oh, okay, now I'm making an argument to put it back on S tier. No, I'm going to put it down there with the Xbox 360 because for me, personally, I mean, it's certainly one of the best-selling gaming systems in the world. One of the best gaming systems in the world. But I'm putting it on an A tier because it's my list, and that's where it belongs for me. The $600 PlayStation 3. I fought against the system so much. I would just yell at people for wasting their money on the system. And then I finally got one, and it was my preferred system for that console generation. Barely touching my Xbox 360, barely even playing PC games, almost exclusively playing on PlayStation 3. Oh, God, what all I play on this? Mortal Kombat was on this. There were Final Fantasy games on this. There was so much on the PlayStation 3. Last of Us. S tier. As expensive as it was, as difficult as it was to design for because of the stupid cell technology, God, I loved my PlayStation 3. To this day, I still love my PlayStation 3. Little Big Planet. Do I need to say anything more? Little Big Planet. Yeah, nobody else cares about the game, but I loved it. The PlayStation 4, however, it had a copy of Last of Us, much improved version of Last of Us, I should say, with photo mode. Backwards compatibility to some extent with PlayStation Now, and what an incredible library. This generation has been absolutely phenomenal. Does this belong on the S tier? Absolutely. I really think it does. I'm probably showing my allegiance to PlayStation here a little bit, because obviously I'm more of a PC gamer, and you can see that I really love Nintendo, but at the end of the day, the PlayStation 4 was not my preferred console for this generation. I spent more time playing on the Xbox than I did my PlayStation. Honestly, Francis, though, prefers the PlayStation 4. But the PlayStation 4 has been one of the best gaming consoles of all time, with that exclusive lineup. The third-party games look absolutely phenomenal on it, and of course they brought VR into the living room. If I didn't put this on S tier, I think I would be a fool to not put that on S tier. Absolutely. And one of the best gaming console systems of all time. So yeah, it belongs on the S tier, both personally and I think objectively. The Xbox One, though, has been the water cooler for the last year of my life. I watch my Netflix on here. I watch my Hulu. I watch my HBO on here. And I play most of my third-party games on the Xbox. It is definitely my personal preference in this generation. However, the games lineup is just abysmal. They had that horrible rocky start at the beginning. Game Pass is an amazing service, and I'm so glad they are offering it. But they just didn't do everything that the PlayStation 4 did, and which mostly means the games. And as much as I enjoy the system, as much as I enjoy the Xbox One X being the most powerful system on the market right now, I cannot justify putting it in the S tier. I really can't. I hope next generation Xbox belongs in the S tier, but sorry, folks, you're no NES. You're no PlayStation 2. Oh my God, did I put almost every PlayStation in the top tier? Oh, Xbox fans are going to be so mad after this video. And then finally, the best handheld ever made, which is also one of the best gaming consoles ever made, with an incredible library so far. It's still only, halfway through its life cycle right now, and I think we can easily put the Nintendo Switch on the A tier. But I've been playing with my Nintendo Switch every single day since I got it. I have played indie games there, like Slay the Spire, and I've been playing the first party games, Animal Crossing, Mario Odyssey. Oh my God. Oh, that deserves S tier. It deserves double S tier. I should have added an extra tier for the Nintendo Switch. Perfection. Absolute perfection. If you could have told the version of me that owned an Atari 2600 that one day I would be carrying around a gaming console that could put out those kind of graphics in my pocket, in my backpack, I would have called you a fool. And yet here we are, living in that future. Mwah, masterpiece. Oh, love my Nintendo Switch. So that's my tier list for gaming consoles. I hope you enjoyed this little stroll down memory lane and hearing some of my stories about the gaming consoles I've owned and where I would rank them in my personal life. Let me know where you agree and disagree on the list down there. While you're down there, like this video. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It could change the fate of this video. And if you're already subscribed, hit that notification bell so you can get videos like this as soon as they go live. I thought this would just be a fun little experiment for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. While you're here, watch some more videos. Thanks for watching. I love you very much, and I'll speak with you again soon.